What is the biggest threat to America right now in your opinion? Big time. People assume the entire South is Republicans and states like New York and California is all blue when that's completely wrong. NYC is blue but the state as a whole isn't. Major cities of Cali are blue but the rural areas aren't. The southern states are majority red but their cities are almost always blue. It's kinda crazy to think about, especially when people get into the whole divide even with the voting system itself is in question. Cities want it to be popular vote because they usually have the majority. Rural areas want the electoral system because it gives smaller towns and states to have a bigger impact than they would with each vote alone. I see both sides' argument, with one every vote should count and they don't see why if you win in popularity why you wouldn't win. On this flip side, I understand that people will vote for whatever everybody around them is so you'd have a large amount voting just because they're in a certain influenced area rather than voting for who they believe is truly best. From whence shall we expect the approach of danger? Shall some transatlantic military giant step to earth and crush us at a blow? Never. All the armies of Europe and Asia could not by force take a drink from the Ohio River or make a track on the Blue Ridge in the trial of 1,000 years. No. If destruction be our lot we must ourselves be its author and finisher. As a nation of free men we will live forever or die by suicide. Abraham Lincoln. If, in a hypothetical what-if scenario, the end of the world started with a single civil war so aggressive, technical and dangerous as to trigger the end, I believe that it'd start in America for many reasons. As a foreigner, also largely because you guys are so well connected globally that most of the developed world would likely wade in to help whatever side in a very short period of time. Hands down I would say apathy. People will rage on social media or in social conversations about things but then do nothing and be ignorant of them in their own daily lives, shouting strong opinions about what we should and shouldn't prosecute or what sentences are or aren't fair but can't name the person they voted for last year to be the district attorney and county judge where they live, can't name where those people went to law school, what their qualifications are, what their philosophies on prosecuting and judging are. They only know what party they voted for. And then God forbid a jury summons show up they're annoyed as shit and just want out of it even though sitting on a jury is literally being handed the power to tell the state, feds what they can or cannot do. The fact that most people besides in maybe 5 cities can't name the mayor or chief of police for the place they live in, but would toss out 3 friends for disagreeing with them on Facebook about what some random senator tweeted will be what ends us eventually. We are in an age where local politics, which most strongly affects us, is literally an unknown in people's minds, meaning they can basically do whatever the fuck they want because even the media ain't going to throw resources behind investigating where the school board is spending its grant money when instead they can get exponentially more views by non-stop coverage of hot topic politics. I do agree, but knowing what colleges people went to or their exact and precise opinion is a bit much. I am definitely one of these people, not knowing much about my local state of things, and I try not to make any excuses because it is utterly up to me to figure out how things work. I also think that many people don't recognize their local government and ethical issues because there is so much going on in the world. They don't recognize that those same issues are going on in their community, especially if they are in a place of privilege. I know there's a fine line between being able to know and knowing. We are technically able to know everything, but with the expanse of information and the negative quantity of it, we just don't want to. Honestly, I don't blame them. It's hard enough already to cut through the misinformation. Imagine having to do that for dozens of candidates at various levels of government. Maybe I'm not aware of it, but our voting in Canada seems to be very different. My ballots only have a list of parties on it and that's it. From what I gather you all have a dozen different things to vote on each election. Seems like too much to ask from an uninformed voter base. Slide into dysfunction and authoritarianism. We're taught in schools to see democracy as the natural state of affairs, self-balancing, and effective. But the truth is there have been only 200 years of democratic rule, not even for everyone, and thousands of years of authoritarian monarchies, emperors, and dictatorships. I see this complacency when someone or a news article says something authoritarian in the US will go down in the wrong side of history. Newsflash: the winners write history, and democracy is not guaranteed to win. Democracy is a miracle. If we don't recognize how fragile it can be, we will lose it. The fact that so many people are stuck on the two-party system. Over time the parties have basically become choose the lesser of two evils, and anything other than Democrat or Republican is considered hopeless when it comes to winning the presidency. I'd like to be able to vote for a person I actually agree with and feel like my vote does something, instead of just the person who's less likely to take away my rights and knowing if I vote any other way that person likely won't win. Alright, so according to Policy research, if we want to end the two-party system we'd have to do two things. First, we'd have to switch to a proportional representation system instead of first past the post, aka who gets still the 50% of votes first, where parties get seats based on proportionality. For example, if Party A gets 60% of the vote, and Party B and C get 20% each, A gets 4 seats in that district and B and C each get 2. Second, if we switch to this system, we should switch to a parliamentary system or at the very least a semi-presidential system. If we have a presidential system with more than 2 parties, it typically leads to significant gridlock where little to no legislation gets passed. See Professor Scott Mannering's research on multi-party presidentialism. All this would require drastic changes to the U.S. Constitution which are super unlikely to happen. For now, I think we should prioritize change on the local level. It's not impossible, but the two-party system is baked into our political institutions. I used to wonder why it was like this until someone explained it to me. Suppose there's 3 candidates, A, B, and C. You'd be happy with either A or B, just not C. But you only get 1 vote, so gotta choose one or the other. Turns out there's many others like you in the same boat. Half of them vote for A, the other half vote for B. Election results: 30% A, 30% B, 40% C. Candidate C wins. Everyone who supported A and B realized they would have been better off just deciding ahead of time to only have one final candidate, so they would all vote for the same person and get 60% to win instead of splitting their votes between the two. So, that's what we do now. Biggest impact of threat: the world moving off the dollar as its reserve currency, bond yields having to rise to double digits. Internally, water wars: the West has been oversubscribing the Colorado for way too long. There's a massive clusterfuck of a problem brewing between that and federal land use effectively locking off large portions of those states. Venture capital realizing there's other places than the US to invest and base out of, Singapore or somewhere else becoming a major hub could be rough. Chronic obesity and poor diet, health habits. Our healthcare costs are out of control, but when I hear people compare us to other countries on outcomes I've been to, I can't help but think they do a better job of staying within a reasonable weight, off the hard drugs, and maintaining healthy dining habits. Too much corn. So true. It's a mix of misinformation and people too easily, with the help of media, labeling all things as good, bad or black, white. There's so much nuance being missed by most Americans on many important topics. It's disheartening. Is it lack of education or lack of critical thinking? Or it is the age of social media and TV that encourage this type of thinking? We need college seminar-type discussions on these issues, not the media playing on people's emotions and fears. Interestingly, there's also a lack of trust of experts, which I can't explain either, and may be the most fatal flaw. Using Google and YouTube to educate yourself is a really bad idea. Your early search results and many topics are going to lead to conspiracy theories and debunking. If you Google who was president in 1842, the answer John Tyler comes up along with a bunch of links to sites like Wikipedia, history websites and official government sites. All of these are clearly factual, and there's no evidence of even anything suspicious. You wouldn't even think to question it. There's 0 seeds of doubt from such a search. Now consider what happens when you Google "is the earth flat?" You get a straight, unsourced answer that says no, the earth is round, and then most of your answers are from articles called things like How to Debate a Flat Earther, 5 Facts That Disprove Flat Earth Theory, or Fighting Flat Earth Theory. Even if you know nothing beforehand and have managed to completely avoid a conspiracy theory, Google has already told you that there is such a theory and that most places actively push against it. The seeds of doubt get planted. Thus, if you were the sort of paranoid person who could be suckered into falling for such conspiracy theories, wouldn't you feel just a little suspicious that most of the links are about how to disprove something? What you're seeing is a bunch of people trying to argue against something you never seen anyone argue for, but why put so much energy into that? Thus you start digging into the rabbit hole. Honestly, this more than anything, and probably made worse by even educated people using 20 minutes of Google and 5 minutes of YouTube to prove everything, coupled with people not wanting to learn or hear proven facts, not just COVID or elections, but saying shit like Earth is flat. Aliens rule the world. Wind is created by China to fuck with America. Moon landing fake. Thing is, you're never going to change these folks' minds, and they have a right to their beliefs even if they're wrong, but it's hard. Division. We have been set against one another, brother against brother, friend against friend. We have allowed ourselves to be utterly dominated by our ideologies and those who would seek to use them against us. It breaks my heart to watch how every single issue is turned into an us versus them argument, every single time. Well, guess what? There is no them, no boogeyman whose destruction will assure us a safe, happy, and prosperous future. There is just us. Life is messy. There is no one right way to move forward. It requires balance. It requires sacrifice. It requires compromise. Most importantly, it requires humility. Humility to admit that you may need to sit down, shut up, and listen, not mock, ridicule, and deride someone else's perspective simply because it seems incompatible with our own. We let people who wait in the shadows to drive our nation to the brink of destruction while we pathetically finger point and blame one another. No one wants to move forward anymore. They just want to be right, regardless of what that means. No accountability for those who would use our mutually assured destruction for their own benefit. Just another chance to sit around and pontificate about the evils of the others, rather than looking at things objectively and perhaps with a little compassion or empathy. We are taught to literally hate anyone who would go against the standards of either side. You either are 100% a part of the team or 100% against it. No room for discourse or, heavens forbid, cooperation. And this can't stand, because at the end of the day there is only us. The bitter division between the left and right. They're not just people you disagree with anymore. They're seen as the enemy, and it's wrong. I think it's dangerous, and more people will die before it's over. I hope our nation survives and improves. I personally am on the left and live in a deep red state with a rep supermajority in the legislature, rep governor, rep senators, almost all rep Congress people, and someone in my state's subreddit told us all on the left to get out of the state, a state we can't hope to have any political say in. I'm sure she's not alone feeling this way. When did we stop respecting our fellow Americans and their rights to vote how they want? Lack of education. I know I've lived a privileged life, and that is why I was able to learn as much as I did, but damn, it's wild to me stick to such ancient educational topics and practices. This isn't just in the Trumpy towns full of Christian influence on the schools, although it's much worse in those areas, and it'll be a much harder battle to fix them. My old high school, well-funded and top in its state, for public schools that is. Courses that led to critical thinking skills outside of mathematics are still 100% optional. Meanwhile, people with no interest in a STEM field are being coerced into learning calculus. I swear I learned more in my applied statistics class than everything else my senior year combined. Taught me how to reason, how political parties and other agenda-based organizations try and fool you. Still had to struggle bust through classes that seem to practice nothing but memorization skills. It's no wonder our average functioning adult goes from 0 to 100 the minute they feel they are being questioned. They've spent all their most important developing years being taught there is a single right answer to all problems, and anyone who questions is just a disruptive boat rocker. Misinformation. While I don't know if it's exactly the biggest threat, it still is a pretty big on. I find a good example to be the crowd of homophobic people within Gen Z. There seems to be a lot of them, and part of that is misinformation. I was homophobic in middle school because of what my mom had been telling me into stuff I was reading online about how being gay was weird. When I was told stuff like it's not natural and not scientifically possible, both lies, it made me not like them. I did some more research about a year later and found that to be untrue. I was no longer misinformed on the topic. It's government and their ties to private companies. It's honestly the sole reason no meaningful regulation is ever passed, because the government ends up being funded under the table by private corporations, and in turn the government never passes laws that inhibit the generation of profit, and as anybody with eyes and a semi-functioning brain can clearly see, that's not good for anyone for a few reasons. America cannot fucking handles crisis to save its life, or anybody fucking else's life for that matter, because responding appropriately to crisis often involves reducing labor in some way, and that inhibits profit. No meaningful or useful regulations for protection of the environment from man-made pollution can be put in place, because private corporations would then have to spend money to adhere to the new laws, as well as they would gouge the fuck out of customers to make up the difference. Employee rights might as well not fucking exist in a lot of professions, because let's face it, without the labor laws we already have, working conditions would likely still be the way they were during the beginning of the Industrial Revolution. That is not fucking good, and since the government protects private business now more than it does individual citizens, it's next to impossible to update those laws or pass new ones to improve the quality of life of the labor force. The point is, corporations exist to make money. They don't exist to make the world a better place. They are not moral entities and have no will nor reason to improve the lives of common people, so they should not be given free rein to act however they want, because they will abuse and exploit the absolute shit out of anything they can until everyone's either dead or someone stops them. Those same non-moral entities have political figures in their pocket, and they've already proven that they are more than willing to spread misinformation while burning the planet down to keep turning a profit. That is the biggest threat to America, in my opinion, hands down. The actual answer is relative irrelevance. America has thrived as a global superpower for so long, and it did that because the rest of the world was basically wrecked for decades after WW2, if they were even developed in the first place. Many of the other major powers, Russia, Saudi Arabia, China, etc., are only even as big as they are because America started trading with them and needed cheap labor and gas. It's entirely possible for the rest of the world to close the gap, maybe in a generation or two, and then America will just be one country among many. It might already be, but not to the extent that it will be, and that's probably okay. It's not catastrophic, it just means that the typical bullish way of doing things is not really going to work as well going forward. Examples: corrupted cops that do police brutality and abuse their power, rank abuse in military, especially when a rapist soldier went as far as to kill a subordinate he raped in pieces to silence her, teachers being underpaid and forced to sell their own bodies just to meet ends for themselves and to buy crayons for their students, discrimination against LGBTQ when them being happy should mean anyone should have courtesy to wish them a good day and well, and not the bad day with death wishes and violence. American military is literally weakened with the executive order under Trump to throw out all trans and LGBT people out of the military with a dishonorable discharge despite having served for years already. For some veterans, Texas and many parts in America blaming wind power and solar power to not be enough to power the country when it's just their infrastructure not being upgraded enough because the funds are being used in useless things like our military creating a multi-million cost solar death ray that was to give protesters cancer and missiles to turn enemy third world countries gay. Karens and cans like Amy Cooper that still call the police on colored people and people of different religion just for jogging, breathing, and existing. Betsy DeVos scamming college kids and making them pay for bills that have been waived and forgotten, yet she still makes them pay when they can't afford it, but she can afford it for them and still keep her multimillionaire status. History denial consisting of slavery denial, civil rights denial, religious denial, Holocaust denial, Indigenous peoples denial, global human history denial, impacts on Earth from humans denial, and these scum continue to say it's over-exaggerated and brainwashing education that's false, anti-vaxxers that plague social media and still continue to push out their narratives convincing dumb parents not to follow doctors' orders, and not a surprise their child is dead from a simple flu when anti-vaxxers say just put potatoes in socks and feed berries and don't drink water, flat earthers fueling false information, lies, and stupidity thinking they're funny doing it, while a good portion of them are the same exact people as Karens, Kens, anti-vaxxers, history deniers.